So if we could roll the tape.
Good.
We are set, so we're gonna call this to order. And, let me note that Gresh is meeting with a major vendor in the valley and a major customer in the valley, and they be joining us late, and we'll do the roll call.
Yes, Committee Chair Miller,
Here.
Committee Vice Chair Rennie,
Here.
Director Gibbons,
Here.
Director Elahi.
Here.
Thank you. I'll note Committee Member Oberg is absent as well as Director Nunez. And just for the record, Director Nunez, we are anticipating will no longer be our representative for Milpitas. They have a council meeting this evening where they will reappoint our board representative tonight.
Okay.
I may bring this up for staff remarks, but you can table it for then, but maybe this committee wants to provide an opinion of whether we want to fill that's opening on the 6th position or just leave it with 5 for the rest of the year. We can bring that up for staff remarks.
Okay, so I know we have a consultant on the phone. Should we reorder our agenda, jump straight to that?
That'd be great if we could, because we start a little bit later, so.
Is everybody okay with that?
I would be fine with that.
Okay, let's just do it then.
Do we have Michael Berwinger on the phone?
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi, so Michael is, you may remember he spoke at our June Finance Committee meeting regarding the overview of the power prepay, and a lot of, it's a complicated subject and a lot of moving parts. I invited Michael back for this meeting to one, just to refresh our memories on what the deal is all about. It's been a few months since we last talked about it. And also to provide an update of what we're doing moving forward. For instance, I believe Silicon Valley with East Bay, along with Monterey Bay, and possibly Peninsula Clean Energy. We'll kind of go at this together, the 4 of us, into probably the next step would be an RFP to find out if Goldman's the only player in town to sort out a lot more of the details. But Michael is certainly been heavily involved in that effort, so I want to also get a briefing from him on what's going on with that. So Michael, I'm going to hand out to the group right now, just for their refresher, the Goldman Sachs slides from a couple months ago, just to provide a briefing of what the prepaid deal is all about. And if you don't mind, just maybe spending a few minutes on that, and then just update us on what's going on with the RFP process.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. I think, just as a reminder for folks, there is there's a proven financial mechanism called a prepayment transaction that's been used by countless number of public power entities over the last couple decades to procure long-term supply of commodities, mostly natural gas, but the IRS regulations allow for that commodity to be energy as well. I think over the last year and a half, we've been working with a variety of folks in California to explore the potential for a prepayment transaction. We helped SMUD actually execute one the end of last year. We are working predominantly with Goldman, who has sort of a pretty good head start and a pretty good lead on the rest of the market with a structure that really addresses the California need, which is a renewable energy contract. So they have a program now that's called SVCE that addresses renewable energy contracts. Basically, the program allows you to save effectively about 10% on your contract price. I'll pause there because I don't know if you want more detail or just a refresher of sort of what it is. We can talk about kind of, what's happened, in the last couple months. We've talked to a variety of the other SVCE programs, and as mentioned, there's a few folks that are interested in moving forward. There was a question of, well, what do we do next? Is Goldman the only game in town? How do we run the procurement? So I am working this week to draft requests for proposals that can go out to the marketplace. So, there are 3 or 4 entities who have actually transacted to date. and we're aware of about 5 or 6 other entities who are in the process of transacting. So the RFP will go out to 5 to 10 different counterparties who have demonstrated an ability to do these transactions, who are pretty specialized transactions. And then, we'll be able to review the proposals with folks, shortlist some folks to come in and present and maybe dialogue about some of the specifics that folks are looking for from the transaction.
Okay, Liz, have a question?
I'll stop again.
Yeah, let's get a few questions in. Go ahead, Liz.
So, apologies. I remember understanding this when we discussed it the first time around, but that was a while ago. There's a diagram so I'm going to go way back to the beginning, as Dawn suggested. The diagram that shows the commodity swap counterparty and market power and CESI supplier and all of that, municipal conduit. Could you just very briefly review what exactly we're trying to do here?
That's the diagram with the 7 boxes on it.
Yes, thank you. It's called the program structure
Okay.
diagram.
Yeah, no, I know which slide you're talking about. So what you're trying to do is save money, first and foremost.
Got that.
You're trying to procure a long-term supply of energy, which you happen to have already. You already have PPAs that you might look at. Now all you're trying to do is lower the price on those PPAs. So what the transaction is at its core is, you're going to enter into a long-term agreement with a commodity supplier. I'll just call it Goldman, but not wedded to Goldman, just call it Goldman to make it simple. You're going to enter into a 30-year agreement to take energy from Goldman Sachs. Goldman is you're going to offer to Goldman to pay them upfront today for that 30-year supply of energy. Why would you do that?
Yep.
You're gonna do that because you can borrow that money at a tax-exempt rate. That tax-exempt rate is substantially lower than what Goldman borrows money at on the taxable front. So Goldman is looking for sources of capital. Goldman says, I'm normally borrowing at 5%, but you're going to give me money that's valued at 4%. I really like that. That 100 basis points in savings to you, and in return, you're also getting an energy supply, basically.
And just to clarify, Michael, you mentioned we can issue the tax-exempt bonds, but in this case, this transaction, none of this long-term liability sits on our balance sheet.
And that was the other main point.
Okay.
Got it. Okay.
That is correct. So the contractual nature between you and Goldman Sachs is a take and pay contract. Much like every one of your PPAs, you're going to pay for what you get. So if you receive the energy, you pay for it. You pay the discounted price for it. But if you don't get it, you don't pay for it. The bonds will be sold off of that basis. And what an investor is buying is effectively Goldman Sachs credit. They are looking to Goldman Sachs to perform. And if they fail to perform and supply you, when the deal unwinds, the investors solely look to essentially Goldman Sachs. They don't come back to you and ask for their money back. Your only obligation is to pay for what you take.
Okay.
So-
Thank you for
So
that.
if you sold bonds to fund projects, right, you would sell bonds that are take or pay. So it would end up going on your balance sheet. You have to pay that no matter what, whether the project works, whether it doesn't work, you need to pay that debt back, right? That's sort of the traditional debt issuance for asset, for the asset that you might have. Here, it's just the opposite. You're only paying for what you take, and when you get through all the boxes, and I know there's a lot of boxes and arrows, when you get through all the boxes and the arrows, at the end of the day, the debt, even though your name is on the debt, you're not really the obligated person, and investors are aware of that when they buy it.
Yeah, are we paying in advance on this thing? I mean, Goldman Sachs is borrowing money in a sense by letting us pay in advance. But you're saying we pay after we get the power.
We issue bonds, which gives you a bunch of money. That money pays in advance. Okay, and then as power delivers to us, we pay.
No, I'm sorry, the money pays in advance.
To the supplier, right? No, it goes
to Goldman.
Goldman.
So is it going to Goldman before we get the supply or after?
Up front, we sell bonds, they get money.
So we're paying in advance before we get the power?
Yes,
And
yes.
But he said-
then wait a minute, then as we get power, we pay for the power.
But we've already paid them once.
We didn't, we went and borrowed money, so it didn't come out of our pocket here.
Maybe, Michael, you wanna just elaborate on
You want to clarify that?
Yeah, I mean, you're paying the discounted price, so
I said-
you have the security of the long-term supply security at the discounted price, so you still, the bonds make up the difference, if you will.
No, but are we paying it before we get the power or after?
We're basically giving Goldman Sachs a loan by selling bonds.
Right, and then we pay that off as we buy, it gets paid off as we buy the power.
But to the extent, just to maybe also add to that, the transaction really is with Silicon Valley Clean Energy and J. Aaron, or part of Goldman, let's say, who's using them. As far as what's going on with issuing bonds, all that is really not in SVCE's court, right?
They're just using our good name,
Because we have
Tax
guaranteed income
Yeah,
tax exempt
and
status.
tax exempt.
correct.
Okay.
So they sell so these bonds get sold, Goldman then can loan this money out for more, they make a spread.
Right, I got that.
We prepay the supplier, and then Goldman, as they deliver us energy, we pay Goldman.
But we're not paying twice.
We're not paying twice.
No,
We're-
you're not.
And if the bonds all go belly up and that whole thing implodes, it's not on us either, that's all on Goldman.
No, I understand all the part, I'm just trying to figure out the transaction because we're paying them in advance, but we're really not, we're lending them money, but if we're lending them money, then they have to pay us back. But they pay us back with the power, I suppose, is the way to look at it.
Not quite. I don't think that's quite right.
You're purchasing a long-term supply of energy,
But
30-year supply of energy.
But we're not actually lending them money, which is what I said initially. Goldman Sachs or whomever is issuing bonds in our name based on the fact that, like any municipality, we have a guaranteed income of the sale, in this case, of electricity. And the bonds can be issued, I'm just gonna pick a number, at a discount rate of 4%. They normally would be paying 5% if they needed money, so there's a delta there that we get the advantage of.
So we're sort of paying Goldman ahead of time for power that we're gonna get, and then using a bond, and then we pay that bond back as we sell our power.
Purchase power, yeah.
All right,
At a reduced rate.
But you only pay the bond if you get the power over time.
Right.
So then if you don't pay the bond, it defaults. But the defaulting party in that scenario is Goldman, because Goldman didn't deliver you the energy that they promised.
So what do you
So
need-
the investors would look to Goldman to pay them back.
Yeah, so what do you need from us in this discussion?
For this discussion, it was just, as Michael mentioned, he's going to put together an RFP this week, so I just maybe wanted him to brief the committee on who's involved,
Refresh our memories.
refresh your memories, and then who's involved in this, and what's going on in the next couple of weeks to kick this off. So I'll maybe just push it over to that conversation, Mike.
Yeah, so as I said, we're working on getting an RFP together. We're gonna send it out to the market, all the folks that we think to be active in the space. I expect that we'll get several responses back, and, the folks that are interested, so yourselves and the 2 or 3 other CCAs will have the opportunity to read the responses, the expectation is to shortlist 2 or 3 people to come in and have more robust discussions face to face. I think that's always easier. And then, that should play out over the next month or so, and somebody will be selected to potentially move forward with a transaction at that point.
If I may just add to that, the startup costs, or rather all these costs of bond counsel, those could be significant. And that's why sharing it with others, so we are in touch with at least 2 other CCAs who are interested in this. And so just doing an RFP process is the way to go.
So what's the touch point for the board?
This point is an informational item, only just to give you a briefing of what's going on with this. We'll have, once we go through the RFP process, a lot more information at the October Finance Committee meeting. Also gives us a chance to put together an FAQ document to cover all these questions that you have, and we'll have that ready for the October meeting. So really no action item, this was just a briefing.
So we'll see this again before it goes to the board?
Yes.
And we'll see it after the RFPs come back,
Yes.
not before we send it out?
You see-
Yes.
Yes, for sure, after, yes.
You're gonna send it out, next time we talk about this, we will have
Results.
some RFPs in hand to discuss.
Yeah, at a minimum, so we put the RFPs out, we get the responses, you'll be briefed again. And I'm thinking maybe 1 or 2 meetings with the board, just depending on what we talk about, because all these lines, just getting to a certain level of comfort,
Yeah, this chart needs a line right through the number 3 that says this is our side and this is somebody
Yeah.
else's
and this is
side.
where some of those FAQs will help.
Right,
And I think you could help shape what those FAQs ought to be, before we take it.
so do we have any more questions on this one?
I just want to assume that the startup cost, you said there's gonna be startup cost, is insignificant compared to the discount we're getting on the supply.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah,
It's worth the investment.
it's all net, so when you're talking about this.
Okay.
Any other questions? Then I guess you guys proceed with all haste.
Okay.
Is there any other consultant on the phone? If not, we'll go back to the beginning.
We do have another consultant on the phone, Chris and Christine from Barclays Bank, to talk about item number 2, which is the credit rating update.
So Michael,
Michael, I think you're good unless you want to stay on for this conversation. Otherwise, you're free to sign off.
Okay, thanks. I'll probably stay on for this and drop.
Yeah, because Michael's also our financial advisor and will be involved in the credit rating update as well. So Chris or Christine, are you on the line?
Yeah, good afternoon, Don. It's Chris Roberts.
Great, thank you. So you guys have materials that we handed out last Friday regarding this topic with the rating agency update. Wanted to, so we have Michael from PFM Financial Advisors who just spoke on the prepay, who's also going to be our financial advisor through this process, and also have engaged representatives from Barclays Bank who has experience working with another CCA and also helping them in the process right now obtaining the credit rating. So between financial advisor, Barclays Bank, and our own good financials, we're going into this credit rating process pretty strong position. So I'd like to just brief the committee on where we are right now with the rating agencies. So we have talked to Moody's. We signed an application to start the process. They approved it, and we are now free to start talking to their analyst and get this process going.
Oh, good.
So with that, I'd like to maybe defer to Chris on the overall process, the timing, and they also, the committee also has the outline that that you gave me on Friday. So if there's any part of that outline you want to cover as well, but I'll go ahead and defer to Chris on the process.
Sure, good afternoon, everybody. So there's a few things to talk about. I think there's also another handout that was the Moody's JPA structure as an information item, so that's something also as a good background for this. Right now, there are 2 rating agencies that are looking at the CCA entities. One is Moody's Investors Service, and then most recently, Fitch Ratings also released ratings on Marin. That is their first foray into the marketplace. So those are all really good results. I think the more rating agencies we get to look at the CCAs, the better. But as Don mentioned, the initial communication was with Moody's. So that was with the business side of the entity. So with all the new regulations, just as a quick background, coming out of the financial crisis, there's a lot of independence with the rating agencies. There's a business side where Don's been in contact with them to arrange the business arrangement. From that step, we'll then take it to the credit analyst. And basically, we will be helping you along with PFM to outreach to the credit analyst side. And the individuals that are involved in that, just as a background, have also looked at Marin Peninsula and are looking at other couple of CCAs as we speak, all to try to get a credit rating. So they become much more familiar with the CCA market, the understanding, the underlying governance, and so hopefully Silicon Valley will be able to take the benefits of some of those growing pains. But we'll be working with you and your financial advisor basically to do the outreach with Moody's and the credit analyst. We will set up a meeting to have an in-person meeting for them to come out and meet with you guys and with your staff. We will work in tandem putting together a formal credit package and credit PowerPoint presentation. And what the outline you have in front of you is just a draft presentation that we put together as a discussion point to move forward. But those are the main highlights that the credit analysts would like to see in a formal presentation. Just walking through the steps to have the formal presentation. We'll have some follow-up questions, and then from that, they usually take 2 to 3 weeks to formalize the review, the underlying documents, the financials, the audits. They'll review all that information. And what we have advised and what we would recommend is that there's a couple of different ways from that you can move forward. There's an indicative rating process, which basically they'll go through the analysts and look at the credit, and they'll get back to you as to what they think that the ratings will be, but not make that public. So depending on what that rating process is and what they come back with, it'll help formulate what the Silicon Valley Clean Energy wants to do. We think all that could be formal, by the way. I don't think that this process is pretty formalized now, but that will allow you to have some more feedback with the rating agencies before they actually release the rating. And then once you do that, you agree on that, then they will publicly release the rating. That again takes 2 to 3 weeks, and from there, there'll be some communication in the interim, but this process probably takes anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks from the initial communication till the final review. With that, I'll stop and see if there's any questions, but there's a couple of things that are more specific to you guys that will also be part of this process.
So this is essentially exactly the same set of material that the other CCAs provided to the rating agencies?
I would not say exact, but so there's the packet that's given to you. There's a framework that Moody's puts together that they look at. So there's the basic answer to your question. Yes, there's a kind of a standard package. The JPA structure, your governance, regulatory, financial, and then your kind of resource mix, right? So that's the general 5 things that to look at, but obviously, some of the JPA and the underlying governance is similar, but your power contracts, your financials, your board, your service territory are going to be unique to Silicon Valley.
Well, of course, we have the best customers that are most likely to stay, and they want to pay more, so we got all that. One thing, and I brought this up before, I just don't see where it fits, right? The contracts that we've entered into are above water. They would cost more to replace, and so there's actually a real value there.
Positive market.
Yeah, the mark-to-market sheet, where do we do that? Where do we express that we have not only cash assets, but we have assets and that we got contracts at favorable prices.
I think that's where, when you go back to the outline,
We do cover that in the outline, yes.
so under power resources, power resources,
Maybe it's just I didn't see the words the way I was thinking, but that was about it.
existing positions and collateral under contracts.
I see it.
Oh, I
That's a fair
see.
vote in there.
So I think that's, so they're interested in our risk management, what
Yep.
structures we have, what policies we have. And then this is where we get into the details of our positions also. Chris, the point that Howard has made before is we have a net positive mark-to-market.
Yep.
How do we
Leverage that.
communicate that? And I think where Howard has mentioned this at a board meeting also is like, once you get a better rating than maybe the first two CCAs out of the gate.
Yep.
And so we're wondering if this and other things could help us.
Yeah, is this,
Yeah, so absolutely, great question. So that will, this is a basic outline, but that will be fleshed out as part of the in-person interview. So we'll have that as part of the presentation, but we'll hit those, what I would suggest maybe is have something up front as like the main items that we want to hit as part of this discussion. But yes, the rating agencies, so it's not only the opt-out, it's not only, the spread between your rates and PG&E and all that type of stuff, it's how you manage your business. And to the extent that you do it on maybe a superior way, having a positive mark-to-market will set you apart from your other CCAs, or not even just the CCAs, just other publicly owned utilities. So a main thing that they have is what the rating agencies have looked at. They've looked at the amount of cash you have. So to the extent that there is a unforeseen, kind of mass exodus out of your service territory for unknown reasons, because that's the way, banks and credit agencies like to look at. They like to look at the doomsday scenario. The more cash or liquidity you have to offset that, the better. And then secondly, the better you manage your portfolio to withstand that, are all things that they'll look at as a positive standpoint. So, Howard, for every positive, unfortunately, for every positive, there's a negative that the credit agencies will come up with. And so our job, along with the financial advisors, to basically highlight the strengths and talk about the disadvantages and how you guys, along with your hedging policy, and your resource mix policy, your financial policies, have taken all these things into consideration.
I get all that. My only fear was that is these contracts could be viewed as just sort of a risk management-y sort of thing. We got them at good prices or whatever. Or it could be, the total other end of the spectrum is they're a hard asset. They could be sold and money could be made. And my interpretation is that nobody's pushed very much to consider them much of assets. They're just sort of in the whole mix of stuff. And I think that since it's a non-trivial amount of positive money, that's someplace on our sheet, there should be a number that's big that says this is a net positive asset on a mark-to-market basis. I mean, the footnotes go in there. Of course, subject to change and volatility. Because I haven't seen anybody else show that. And then,
Have you seen that in the other presentations, Chris? Or Mike?
Chris.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, we have. So everybody manages their system a little bit differently. Some take a short position, some take a long position. So not all the CCAs are alike, even though we try to kind of lump everybody together. It's a much appreciated comment. And so everybody manages, so I guess the easiest way for me to answer is everybody manages their system, their contracts slightly differently. Again, without getting too much detail, I've been in some of these meetings, not only with the CCAs, where, you have this positive asset, but then the credit agent, the analysts will bring up, well, then you have wholesale trading risk, and while it's an asset today, that can change in a couple of years from now, depending on where the market is. So those are all things that we'll flush out as part of the discussion.
so are there other areas that you see as differentiating items for us?
Can I ask a question?
Sure, let's see if he's got any of that, and then we'll go.
Okay, go ahead, and please answer that, Howard's question, I guess.
So your service territory, and to be honest, I'll have to go through more details. I have your audited financials, but these are all discussions that we'll be able to get in when I talk to Girish and Don to flesh out, but the main thing is your service territory, the contracts that you're talking about, your 3 years worth of financials and how the liquidity and financial metrics have been improving in all 3 years. Those are things that come off the top of my head.
Okay, that was the big picture question, please, go ahead.
You know, I think Howard brings up a good point on the mark-to-market and advantage. Is that something that we should try to put in our financial statements when the CPA can put a note on it? Would that help in evaluating the financials? That's my first question.
Do we list that in our,
No, we haven't been showing
Okay,
it.
is that something that maybe worth showing? I don't know, the CPA can probably answer that, whether they want to do that or not.
what do we show in the CAFR right now?
We just, on the treasury report or the financials, we talk about the positions we have, hedging strategy. We do not go into mark-to-market of our long-term contracts. We don't include that in the balance sheet. We could possibly consider that as a footnote in the treasury report.
Yeah, I would think it would be a footnote. I don't think we put that in the management.
There's probably, because there's a negative to it, there's probably a more strategic discussion
Yeah,
about
yeah.
this as
I think we
an
should
asset.
have that
Yeah.
discussion
And,
with our financial advisor,
and
yep.
once we've thought through that, then if there's an appropriate way to report it that we think's gonna look good forever, because I'd hate for it to swing
Well, 'cause
back.
once you put it in there, it's in there.
You can't report it only in the good times.
Yeah, so let's be cautious on
No,
that.
it's not.
Okay, Paul.
The second question I had was, does it make any difference if we own our own real estate, our own building, a commercial property as an asset rather than renting? Would that give the rating services better fee for us? Chris?
That'd be part of your net position. I think that in and of itself is, I would say no, in and of itself, but it'd be part of your overall net position. That would be favorable for sure.
Go ahead, Ron.
So when I read the Fitch ratings report, what we've been talking about, to me, I think falls under what they're calling the operating risk, and they're saying MCE is mid-range. And so doesn't sound too bad. What really seems like it drug MCE out of the A range is their revenue defensibility. They have it as weaker, right? That feels like it was a big boat anchor. And if we want to get above the triple B, that's the area we need to be focusing on, and somehow getting them to think that our revenue defensibility is not weaker, that it's somehow better than MCE's. Part of it is, we're tied, it's all the same stuff seems to apply. They're saying we're tied to PG&E rates, so if our costs go up, we really can't go above PG&E. If we do, it's very easy for people to opt out, and so we start losing our revenue base. They've got a bunch of points like that in there that I don't see how we're much better. We do have a better opt-out rate than we do. Maybe we need to focus on that, right? They started with 78, and their latest ones, I think they said, are in the 89 to 86 to whatever. We started off with 96 or 97, so maybe that's definitely something we want to emphasize to try to show, we are a little more defensible than they are. But any comments from Chris or even Dawn on how do we address the boat anchor that pulled them down?
Go ahead, Chris, if you want to start.
Yeah, sure. So the opt-out rate is much more favorable, so that so guys, remember the credit analysts that we're talking to are traditional muni credit analysts that look at your world as a monopoly, and the fact that there is the opportunity to opt out is just gonna, this is my personal opinion, it's just gonna take time, right? And that 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, I can't really speculate on that, but having Marin have a period of time where the rates were actually higher, and there weren't opt-outs is a good thing. And we know that historically the CCAs, most of the opt-outs occur when you launch. So you don't see a long, beyond that initial launch, for the most part, there are not a lot of opt-outs. But the analysts are paid to say, well, what if? If something happens, what if? There is the mechanism out there that they can opt out, and that's something unless there's a legislative change, I don't think there's anything that we can do against that. So you talk about your service territory, you talk about the political will, the political support of this, and you talk about your liquidity and how the growth of your liquidity is growing. So cash is king, in their world. So the more that we can show from the financial metrics, I think, if I hear where you guys are coming from about how to separate yourself, your financial metrics on a relative basis are better than where Marin is, and that's where I think it's gonna separate you guys.
So
Just their working capital, their days of cash on hand, I think your fiscal year 2019 is really gonna put you guys in a separate place than where Marin is.
So back to the defensibility, and maybe you're not aware, Chris, because nobody thought to mention it, but we've been talking about programs, certainly on the commercial side, you know, different things, different programs we can offer to make sure we keep our commercial customers, or maybe even get more commercial customers. I didn't see any of that kind of discussion in there, and maybe that's a place where we can differentiate ourselves. And I'm not sure how mature all our plans are and if we've shown any success yet, but all the stuff that Don Bray is working on seems like it could go towards addressing this revenue defensibility.
So that's what I had under power resources, contracts. That's what I was getting at there. Any large scale contracts that you guys, where you can lock in customers for a period of time, those are all ways to separate yourself and strengthen your credit.
And to add to that, we've also had some strategic marketing type of initiatives that we'll get you involved in, Chris, and brief you on that.
Okay.
Liz?
So, segueing right off of the comment about commercial retention. Do we have any greater risk because of the direct, Marin's percentage, if I'm correct, Marin's percentage of residential versus commercial is very different than ours. We have a very large percentage of commercial. So are we running the risk of, what Rob was saying, of
DA's not even mentioned in this
right,
Fitch report.
right,
Will
the
they figure it out?
Right, the direct access wasn't mentioned exactly, so same thing. So, how does that filter in? Because we are potentially at greater risk for losing because of direct access.
Mrs. Joy over here. Are you trying to get a job as an analyst? You know, some of these are unanswerable questions since we haven't started, but I think I just want to say the sense of us from the board is that we think we've done something good, and while we haven't seen it, other than an outline, anything near the work product, we will be very interested in seeing how well we can put our best foot forward and how well we can minimize or mitigate the things that they know to be risks and we know to be risks.
Right, and I think what we'll do, that's the point I think of today's discussion, is to gather in your comments to make sure that those get factored into the pitch. Yeah.
And I just have one final comment. We've been just talking about this take or pay approach. I would think that that would be very favorable.
Yeah.
Okay, so however that filters in as an in-process versus fact, whatever, and maybe when it becomes fact, our rating would go up, how often do they update the ratings? I'm just curious how that would, because to me, it seems like quite a great strategy. So-
Also, if the opaqueness around the PCIA changes or it stops changing every year, and that was one of the things that they got nailed on in
Yes,
here.
right.
But if over time, if the changing of that settles down and
Or
maybe
the
it starts being
opportunity to
consistent, yeah, there may be, I don't think it's gonna happen before we wanna go apply, but it could change something in the future.
So I gotta just say one thing, right? We're not doing the credit rating because we're gonna be borrowing money on the market with this. This just is a negotiating element. And so whether we end up with all Bs or aspirationally we ended up with something better, it won't make an operational difference. And if it doesn't make an operational difference, we probably don't put stat back through the whole process to try and get re-rated
I see your point.
for
Okay.
any real reason. I think once we get it, this is probably gonna be a pretty long-term thing. And the agencies will downgrade us if something bad goes on, but I don't think they run around and try and upgrade people. We could ask.
So
but-
actually, if there is a change in your business model and something changes, that'll happen. I was in Alameda when we had a telecom company and an electric company. we were rated A minus. We sold the telecom company, and we went to A plus. So, depending on what happens in the legislature, right, it can go both ways. If you
So
have
when I
more
go off the board, the rating can go up.
I think your
So get that
point
number.
about revenue defensibility, you know, if there's some long-term things that come to fruition, maybe.
Yeah, I guess they're probably more interested in seeing what the risk factors are, not what the reward factors are.
Completely.
So we need to probably look at this list. I don't know if this is a list that Moody gives us or if
This
Chris
is,
prepared that.
Chris,
But they do look at the mitigation of the
Yeah,
risk
that's right.
factors, which are the same
Sure.
thing as award
Right,
factors.
so probably we should focus on making sure whatever mitigation we can do on any of these risk factors, we're doing that.
So this is page 2. So when you look at what we talked about regulatory issues, so typically when you make this pitch, there's a deck. It goes through every aspect of your business.
Mhm.
The wholesale side, the retail side, governance, financial, risk management. Like what Chris talked, we are new to this, right? CCAs are new and the analysts are the same as the public power analysts. Well, public power has a history of 70 to 100 years across the country, so they know what to look for. And so there's not much education, whereas here we're doing both things. We're educating, plus there's going to be some analysis. Yeah.
So you don't need, you've heard everything that we have to say,
good stuff.
and I'm not sure that we can make much more comment till there's more meat on the whole thing. Tell me what the process is and what our next touch point is.
Chris, you want to just expand on next step here?
So the next step would be to reach out to Moody's and set up a meeting, and then us working with the financial advisor and with Silicon Valley putting together the deck. And then to the extent that you would like to see the process of that and comment on the deck would probably be the next step. And we would definitely want somebody from the board to participate in that in-person meeting with the rating agency.
We have our next committee meeting in October. I think we'll have a first draft of the deck by then.
Yeah, and then one of the things that, again, that Don Giddish and I, we talked about is just giving your financial, your end of your fiscal year, September 30th, and kind of folding that into the process as well. Because having a full 3 years with the financials, in particular to Moody's, they like to see that, so that'll all go into the timing of putting everything together. But yes, in October it would be fine.
Okay.
Any other comments? Then let's move along.
Okay, we'll let you guys sign off. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I propose we just keep going. We'll do,
You
budget.
want a motion on the consent calendar?
We're gonna come back to it.
Yeah, it doesn't either way.
Yeah, okay.
Let's just keep going. Let's
Okay.
hit budget. We're on a roll.
You want to pull up
I-
the presentation?
I have only 35 minutes, so just a process check for me, but I got an able-bodied, but you won't have a quorum.
Won't have a
so-
quorum.
So,
So I can leave with the CEO's comments.
Then we better approve the consent calendar before you go.
But we got 2 more action items here too, so there's
Okay.
3 to get through.
And I have comments on the consent calendar, so I don't wanna hold everybody up.
I think we can get through this in about 10 minutes.
We've seen it before.
Just outline, so since we last met, the Finance Committee and the budget, we also met with the board. We also reviewed the budget with the member agency working group, got their feedback. And we'll look to get your feedback today with looking for approval next week. Just changes to the budget that you see in the recommended budget versus the proposed budget from last month. Again, no changes on energy revenues. Power supply, I just updated open positions with current market prices. So it was about a $700,000 increase in power supply costs. Operating expenses, about $300,000 higher than the proposed budget, just updating it with meeting with the departments again. Some of the contracts that you have in today's board packet, just updated with actual numbers instead of estimates. Then on non-operating, I included the actual cost from the term sheet on the line of credit, as well as I lowered our investment income just a little bit to account for a little more volatility in interest rates.
Falling interest rates.
Correct. And no change then in debt service transfers to the programs fund. So our bottom line number is still very robust, 50.5 million. of surplus. This will just be the high-level summary. We covered this last time, just updated the numbers with the recommended budget numbers. Just want to review personnel one more time. So we're looking at a funding of 27 FTEs plus 5 part-time folks. We'll include a rates manager and the analyst. In the resolution, you'll see the salary tables updated by 4%. And then we added 3 new positions for broadbanding, so you'll see more positions in broadbanding, TO, than you actually, or table of organizations, than you see that are actually funded. But we included a senior communications specialist, a senior communications outreach specialist to provide some promotional room there in Pam's group. We also have a senior rates analyst, so we'll put the job out for bid. Maybe we get someone that's more fitted for a senior analyst role. Well, that gives us that option. Again, these are not funded, but they are included in the broadbanding table of
First
organization.
line, that 27 FTE includes the 5 part-time?
No, so that's 27 FTEs and then 5 part-time folks.
So this is 29 and a half FTEs.
That's one way to look at it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's why you use FTE means full-time equivalent,
The
so.
part-time are temp
They're
positions.
yeah.
So they're not, so,
Okay.
You could look at
temporary.
it
So we
So
may
don't
want to
call
change
them
it to
part-time.
temporary.
That's
Call
fine.
call them temporary, please.
So I would do, instead of a comma, I do a plus 5
That would
temporary.
make it a lot
Correct.
clearer. Thank you on both of those.
I look at it one way. And you see it another way.
I know, it's so funny, in our cities, we are so sensitive to how many
Right.
people there are exactly.
And these are not full-time temporaries. We have,
They're, right.
it just depends. So we had someone who spent, Robert Sprague, spent 5 months with us, kind of at about 15 hours a week.
We got it.
It could be a full-time or a part-time.
Yes,
But it's a temporary.
right.
Do they get pension or retirement or anything else or not? Is that the difference?
Yes, they do get a contribution to PARS.
Which is the equivalent of Social Security.
Yeah,
Right, okay. You don't do both, you just do PERS.
just
Right.
PARS.
Bars, not
Bars.
birds.
PERS,
Not
not
hers,
PERS.
not hers.
Okay, so anybody else on this slide? Well, let's
Fast jump, we,
let's
fast
move
we
along.
jumped on that
Oh,
one.
There was a question on HR last time at the board meetings.
We'll come to that.
Oh, that's good.
All
Okay.
right, so here's the follow-up from the comments made at the board meeting. This was beyond the human resources, quite a few good comments on this. So on the left, kind of looked at this from an operations viewpoint, and then on the right, culture. On the left, so currently when we formed the agency, we went through this with the benefits discussion last summer. It was kind of a bare bones approach to benefits, and we beefed a lot of that up, but we didn't really beef up the current offerings on their payroll system or HR services. So Nick and Eric and myself, we went through an RFP process this summer. We're close to finalizing to have an actual HR generalist on site for certain times of the month. That'll be accessible for folks to talk to or have questions. And I look at this as more of a person who's gonna update the handbook and deal with rules and operational type issues that come up. So that's gonna be a nice change compared to what we have now.
So they'll deal with the employee handbook for policies and procedures.
Correct, those types of questions. Mentioned we'll have a new payroll system. It's also gonna feature a lot better onboarding application for new folks. Talked about funding another compensation study this coming summer. And we also, through that RFP process, selected a benefits broker to help folks, not only help us with having the best cost out there, but help folks navigate through the different benefits options. On the right, talk about culture, and this is where I think it's, as far as hiring a full-time HR person, I think that's sort of, let's maybe step back and see if we still need to do that, but we have some options we want to consider, and Girish, you want to chime in on this?
Yeah, so I think we got one set of comments. I would like to have more of a discussion with the board to fully understand any other aspects of why you think we need a full-time HR person. But in the interim, just based on the one comment we got from the board at the last meeting, I think investing in the culture side of it, the administrative service manager, and I'm thinking there may be some other things too that we can do without hiring a full-time HR manager. There are ways in which you could do 360 surveys, not just, I had a 360 survey this time. We can open it up to our directors and have those things in place.
So the board said HR manager, which was, as you noted right at the time, we were proposing a solution. And the better approach would be to understand what we're trying to do first. And so I don't think that the board is going to object to the process. I think that this is clearly the right way to go about it. The fact that we jumped to an answer doesn't mean that has to be the answer, I don't think. But I think that understanding the significance, the importance that we are placing on this is the real message. And the actual implementation, I think you just have to make the case that this is the right way to go.
I'd say at this time.
Yeah.
And I need to understand the full ramifications of what the issues are. I think that will take, I feel,
Some
this
time.
isn't the right time to do it, given we had one comment to add one position. But I do think we should be open to, we have the mid-year budget. It can be at any time, you can open the budget up at any time and add a position.
We can, but again, I think it's the process.
Yeah.
You were there at the meeting, you heard it all.
Yeah, I heard all that. I think that one comment was reflective of what the board felt. So everybody didn't comment on it, but I think it was a process that the board had thought that may be a good position to look at. And,
I don't understand.
And encourage it, and you'll get to understand it, but it may be
Right.
in a different setting, I guess.
But again, we gave a solution.
Right, I understand.
What's the problem you're trying to solve?
I can't disclose in this forum.
And that's the whole
Okay.
point here,
Okay.
which we don't want to rush into this without all of us being on the same page.
I think that the budget was on the agenda, it was the opportunity to say that there's this HR area of concern of the board. And while we were in the position space, we said position.
Correct.
I think that you'll make the case, I think this is the right way to talk about it. If you go through some analysis and you say, hey, we need a position, then we do a budget adjustment, right? We can do those at any time.
Right.
Don hates, finance guy, plug your ears, but if the board directed we had to have an HR person, you could absolutely go hire it.
Mhm.
But either way, I don't think we're gonna go hire one until we know exactly what they want them to do.
Exactly.
So the whole process is gonna have to unfold.
Right. And I think, just like any other problem we tried to solve at SVCE, let's try to get a decent understanding of the problem and then direct us to come up with some alternatives and the pros and cons to each one of those alternatives, and I think that would be the process. But just based on the little bit we talked about, this is what we come
No, I
up with.
understand where you're coming
Yeah.
from.
Why do, can I ask a question?
Yeah,
Why do we need a compensation study again? It seems to me we just knew all of that a year ago.
I can't disclose that to you. at
That's
this
what I was
time.
worried about, okay.
No, I can,
Go ahead.
in strategic plan, we say we will do a compensation study every 2 years. And so that's where we are.
Are we at 2 years
By
already?
next summer, it'd
Not
be,
quite, but we're.
not quite,
in that
but it'd
range.
be,
Yeah.
considering the competitive environment we're still in.
Okay.
Yeah, and we do have a couple of new CCAs that have been formed since we first did. So this one, I think it's a good thing to do, to just get that updated every 2 years.
And if there's a problem we're trying to solve, I agree with it, I don't know what the problems are, I was just worried that some of this was just make work that somebody thought was a good idea.
No. The compensation study is a best practice for, I think, city government and public agencies, and becomes.
We usually do them in our town every time we negotiate with the unions, which is 2 or 3 years.
Our city's got it, it's in the contract every 2
I just thought we had
years on
just
a
did,
four-year
we
contract.
just added positions, I thought, within the last year, and we knew
But
at
this
that
is
point.
next year's budget.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
Yeah, this will be
starting
next summer.
October all the way through October, so
So-
it is the year.
So next
So last
summer
summer,
is a
we,
good time to
we,
do it.
I'll give you some data they
we had
might
the
want to do
overhaul, so
inside
this will be
these
2
areas.
years
Okay.
this coming summer. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. The HR thing, again, you get it, we said HR man, HR person, whatever. I don't object to this approach, you'll be
Okay.
selling it to the board, and I think the sensitivity is that there's some concern in this area.
Okay.
A plan, if we needed the person, the fallback is, we'll do an adjustment, we'll hire a person. So we can always get to that answer if that in fact is the correct answer. If it is not the correct answer, we'll be persuaded through thorough analysis of a better correct answer.
Absolutely.
Is that okay?
Sounds good.
You were there.
Yeah, I think that's the approach.
Okay,
There's
anything
kind-
else? Keep going.
All right, so we talked also about, was there enough funding for strategic marketing? And Don commented on it, but we went back through the budget to make sure that we did have the right funding. And it's actually across departments. So for instance, Monica may be funding Ascend Analytics, but part of that is also to support strategic marketing through commercial pricing. So we feel we've got this well covered for next week as far as the various outlets we have that we funded for strategic marketing. Purchasing a facility, this was brought up. Right now, we issued an RFP to bring a broker on board to give us options in this area. I look at it as really 4 options that we have at this moment. We don't have any numbers in front of us. We'll certainly discuss that with the executive committee and brief the finance committee on those findings. But option 1 would be to stay in this location but move upstairs to the 3rd floor, which is a larger space. Option 2 would be to lease somewhere else, which we've been looking at that. Option 3 is just to make it work in our current environment, which would be tight. I think every time you come in here, it looks like it's tight, right? And option 4 is on the table, which is to purchase a facility as well. So all that's on the table, and I don't have any answers for you yet. I didn't increase the budget to include purchasing the building. I think if we go there, we'll reopen the budget and fund it, but
There's a whole process here.
there's a whole process, and we have a lot of numbers we need to look at and consider, and we're looking to get some feedback, hopefully by the end of this week. So that's where we're at right now with the facility options, and much more on this to come.
Good.
Margins by customer classes was brought up. I'd like to meet with Director Javed after the meeting to just go over the specifics, but I prefer not to bring this publicly to the meeting. I think it hurts us when we're trying to compete with direct access and the commercial pricing. So anybody that wants to see the margins can, but I'd prefer not to bring it up.
Yeah, let me make just a sensitivity question, right?
Mhm.
There are different agendas that people might have, and one might be that the lowest possible margin should be on the end user, particularly low income people, right? Another perspective is the minimum margin should protect our direct access business. So some of our business customers might get the minimum margin. The egalitarian would be everybody contributes equally. But again, it depends on sort of a philosophical and maybe even political biases to which is the right way to skew an organization.
About maximize green power sold.
Yeah, PG&E has always had this debate of commercial versus residential. Who's carrying which percentage of the load? Not load, I'm using the wrong. You know, which percentage of the places is where the profit is coming from. And it doesn't look good as a utility to get all your profit from the pure residential customers. At the same time, it's right on it doesn't look good to give away all these customers to go to dirty power. So how you balance those and whether we needed to make some big decision as a board, I don't know, but I first would gather the data and understand the pluses and minuses depending on how you adjust those margin curves. Right now, the direction that we've given is we're willing to get pretty close to the bone to protect the clean message and keep direct access customers. So the board's already given that direction. Go ahead.
Without intending to compliment the previous speaker.
You can criticize me too.
I do think that that's an important discussion going forward, the way you've broken it down into the 3 approaches. I think as we move forward with our programs and other things, I think it's easier for board members to understand what that means. I mean, I don't think I'd have gone there a year ago, never mind 2 years ago, but now I'm in the flow of where the money is and what we're doing and what our mission is and all of the factors.
What the
So,
trade-offs are.
what the trade-offs are.
I guess ultimately it's also a market-driven proposition as to where, what we can get out of it. And maybe there's an alternate source that if you're gonna give cheaper power to the big factories and the big customers, maybe that's where you can put some the state can put some tax on it and get some money for transportation or housing. Because apparently PG&E thinks they've gotta sell the cheapest power to them and we're kinda stuck with where they are. And, there might be a different mode to go where the playing field gets level in some ways.
So we'd be happy to also talk to you about what we've done so far on rates, but in terms of the budget, I think, just in the margin, in terms of response to the board, John, we'd be happy to sit down with you, and part of the board direction also is, you know, this, if we do special contracts with customers, et cetera, you'd be welcome to come into the office and look at all those prices. We're not gonna publish it. Similar to all our PPA contracts, we don't publish that, but if you can see all the contracts.
Yeah, if it's necessary, it could be a closed meeting item, I suppose.
No, we can't go into closed session.
On the customer pricing, you can't.
Just to keep something secret is not a reason for a closed session.
So
We should make sure that the board
The rates
understands
being
that if they want this
kept separate is
information,
not,
they need to
not
contact you.
allowable in
Yeah,
a closed
we're done.
session.
Okay.
So this is just in response to your comment from the board meeting.
I understand. I'm a newbie, so I'll ask these
Yeah.
questions.
I know, but we know who to meet with. Okay, again, just out of respect for time, I got 17 minutes if we can click
Sure,
through.
go for it.
So this was also brought up, what do we do with the money once we get past the reserves target? Again, we'll come back to the board in 2020, and lots of options, and we'll discuss that and amend the cash reserves policy as necessary. So next steps would be, again, you've already got some good feedback. If there's something you want added to this slide deck, please let me know. But we're looking for Finance Committee support to take this then to the board next week. So that makes this an action item. And we talked about the mid-year budget. We'll tweak this again as necessary, or certainly by spring of 2020 when we know better in the direction of rates. So with that, that concludes this time.
So are you gonna take out that margin slide from the meeting?
Just verbalize that we've, who to contact
If you're
There's a
okay
question.
with that,
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So then, go ahead.
So, sort of related, but sort of not related. It ties into some other things on the consent calendar, I think. We are going to be having a change in the board next year. And I don't know if there's anything in the budget or anything in the planning, because one of the things, and I was surprised I didn't read it in the Marin thing from Fitch, or MCE from Fitch. Marin, that's why I didn't, because I just made that connection. Marin has outside board members, and they have a big finance group, and so because they have one of the, I think it's Marin has 28 board members and stuff, and they can't obviously do all of this and all of that. So we had talked a while ago about changing the structure of the board to have more outside committees, or having, instead of having elected officials on the board, having appointed people on the board. And we haven't really thought about that. I would just suggest next year, because we are going to have attrition of several significant board members that will be out as of next 2020, that do we need to think about how the board might be changed? It's just an out there kind of thought related to the budget and the operational efforts.
Chris, we should talk, we should do some sort of workshop on governance.
yeah, I actually,
Separate from the budget, but we should definitely, we need some.
I've offered that up as one of my goals for the board. And so if that's something you'd like to emphasize, I have my evaluation coming up on September 11th too, but I added that as one of my goals. It's outreach and governance.
Okay. Okay, any other questions on this? We do need a motion, because this is an action item. I believe that we're recommending this go forward minus the margin slide, which will be verbalized.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and carries unanimously. Okay, we're almost out of time, let's do our $35 million extension to the credit line.
Okay, thanks.
Renewing of the credit line.
So here, Well, we have, we're looking to, our current credit agreement of 35 million, we just recently expanded, comes to an end on October. So we reached out to River City Bank to turn this into a 2-year agreement, so we don't have to redo this process every year. They can go as far as 2 years, they can't go past that. And the 35 million is right near the cap of what they can offer. So I also reached out to Chris at Barclays, who you just heard from, as well as Bank of America and Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo and Bank of America won't actually even do business with us because we don't have a credit rating, so they won't even go farther than that. Barclays could, except for 35 million, this is actually the best competitive deal that we can get. So,
Yet another reason for a credit rating.
correct. So, so it's a competitive rate. We're looking at really, this highlights some of the changes in this term sheet. When we bring this back to the board, we'll have the full credit agreement ready for you. In fact, I should have that by end today from the bank. One thing that gave Grish and I a little heartburn was the $100 million minimum limit. Right now it's currently, our equity is about 75 million is the bond covenant. They've increased that to 100 million. It doesn't give me heartburn in that we're gonna fall below that. Everything looks good. I just like to get something out of that for them to raise it by that much. But their viewpoint is, you guys are very healthy. Why would you fall below that? So we're okay with it to go forward with that. But that's certainly something that stuck with us a little bit. Everything else, as far as the if you make a draw, the fees are the same. And so we're looking for approval from the finance committee to take this to the board next week.
I got one weird question,
Yeah.
which is, so we pay the fee annually. Supposing after 6 months, we wanna go to Wells Fargo because their rate is cheaper because we got a credit rating. Is there like a termination fee or any of that sort of stuff? Or are we committed to 2 years no matter what?
Now, you can get out of it, but you're gonna pay a fee. What that is exactly, let me research that again. That is covered in the document, but it wasn't in the term sheet, so when I get the document tonight from them, I'll get that answer.
So we
for
can
you.
get out with a fee?
Yes.
Okay.
If it's large, you may want to just do it 1 year, because if you get credit rating, you might be better off with something else. Or
True.
they may reduce it too, you know. Is there, what's the interest rate on this?
Well, if you make a draw, you're gonna pay 125 basis points plus LIBOR, whatever that LIBOR rate is for the month.
Oh, LIBOR went away this year.
Now, it's next year it would go, and so for this term, it's okay. And moving forward,
There's a replacement.
What's
for
the
it.
number right now?
okay, it's
2.5, 3.5?
I'll find out.
Okay.
yes, I can.
Okay, any other questions?
It's over 2.
Have you used this last year?
So we did not use it since we've had it. We've not made a draw.
And we need it because we don't need it?
It helps us helps us to avoid posting collateral on our power supply contracts because they see that line of credit. It's also going to help with the rating agency discussions because they're going to say, hey, the bank is willing to offer this to you. That gives the rating agency a little more confidence in us as well.
Like your credit score goes up if you have a credit.
There you go.
But you use it, I guess it goes higher than it. Don't use it, I don't know.
And it just gives us a little cushion in case we ever need it.
Insurance.
We're gonna fill that with reserves this year, right, Rob?
I hope so.
I hope so. Any other,
2.08%.
any other questions on this right now?
So this is an action item. I'd like to take this to the board next week.
I would make a motion that the finance committee recommend to the board renewal of the $35 million line of credit with River City Bank.
For 2 years.
Second.
For 2 years or 1 year?
For 2 years.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That one carries unanimously. There may be discussion at the board meeting as some of us knew 1 year versus 2. So knowing what the termination clause probably might be worth verbalizing.
Right. I think that's the reason we want 2 years is, it's just admin costs, and it's better from a financial
Locks it in.
standpoint also, telling the rating agencies we have this for 2 years, so our reserves are more stable. And if we can we look at the termination fee if it's, and we know that this is the cheapest.
Yes.
They're also charging us the 87,500 every year, so there's no advantage of going 2 years, you're gonna pay the 87 again next year anyway, unless they
For
come
me,
in.
it's admin,
Yeah.
and
Well, admin fee, yeah, I understand that part.
Yeah. Okay, So there may be some questions, that's all I was saying.
Yeah.
Good?
And now we gotta go back to the consent calendar.
Want to hear the CEO's report?
No, because I gotta leave in.
I don't have anything on the CEO's report, thank you.
Then that made that easy, both ways. Consent calendar, so we would do this as one motion.
Except I have questions, I think, on all of them.
So Liz has questions, now let me ask this question, Liz, just, there are probably some details.
They are detailed.
Can we get some high-level ones?
Would you like me to go over them very in a,
There's only 5 minutes left, and so I just don't wanna run out of time, because if I run out the door, we won't have a quorum. So I just wanna make sure that we vote before I run out.
All right.
No pressure, let's
Go, go, go. Ask, ask,
No,
ask.
it's all right. It'll take me a while to scroll through it.
You can work
Well,
with Tom on
stay after
any
meeting
questions
to
that are there.
Go through that.
Is there any summary that you wanna give
yeah,
us?
I'll tell you, item B is, we've had Brown and Glazing kind of as an extension, legal staff from the day we started. And in addition to much of the regulatory work support they provide us, we've increased the budget a little bit this year because I'd like some assistance for CAISO intervention. So that's Brown and Glazing. Item 1C, it's again renewal agreement, Pacific Printing. We have, from a compliance standpoint, we have a lot of printing activities, so this is a renewal. And item 1D is Marr Accountancy, and that's Mike Marr. He's again an extension of staff. We have him on the org chart, and PO extension of the,
So all three items that you
just
just
renewing.
mentioned will come to the board on the board's consent calendar.
Correct. No street.
And I would
Policy issue.
request that you answer and resolve all Liz's issues before we get this at the board meeting.
Yep.
Because otherwise, we're gonna do it there, right, Liz? Okay.
For review here.
I'll just ask a quick question, I guess. What is the difference between what we were paying them now and what the new contract will pay them? Is there any
I
difference?
believe you've increased it to 50.
For
Let's go
Brown
1B.
Glazing is
Right.
50,000
Yeah.
more, yeah. No, 30,000. We went to
Yeah,
135.
I was just gonna say it was 3,000 and then the other one went down.
Printing?
Yeah. Are you asking for the rate, or are you asking for
Just
the
the,
limit?
the increase that we have,
Contract value.
proposed under the agreement, it's probably in there. but
Brown
I'm just
Glazing
trying to-
went
I'm just trying to
up.
compare between last year and this year.
Because of scope.
Okay.
Pacific Printing, I think, is close to the same. And then Maher is increased by 4% due to just inflation. And then another 12,000 based on a contracts module that we're using that he developed.
Yeah, so printing has come down.
And the question I had on all of them was, it wasn't clear in the contracts about escalation for the 2 years and,
Is there an escalator in the contracts?
Right.
So for Brown, there isn't, it's just 135 each
okay,
year.
and the
Maher,
prices.
it's just 1 year.
Okay, and so I have general questions like that,
Yeah.
not all the
Okay,
agreements.
we can handle that.
Okay, anything else that we need on this?
So we did mention at the start with Director Nunez leaving this
Yeah.
group, so I don't know if that's,
Do we want?
We still have to vote on the consent.
oh, I'm sorry.
I need a motion.
I'll move the consent calendar.
Second, with the request that all outstanding questions be addressed prior to the board meeting.
Yeah, you resolve all that, okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the issue of the number of people at this table,
Is that our discussion or is that the board discussion?
I think the board has to decide, but when I give the report, I think I have to put it up to the board, and I think we stay with 5 until such time. Because just because you're assigned on the board doesn't mean that you pick up the agency or the
Correct.
sub-organization
Yeah, it would,
assignments.
yes, right. You
It's-
wouldn't automatically be
So
the
one point,
LPS
the
person.
quorum number stays the same, but you have one less person to make the quorum.
Exactly, so that's a problem.
Well, the
Yes.
quorum now is 4, so now it would be 3, right?
Not unless we officially change the
Oh,
Wait,
count.
I thought we had 6.
Yeah.
You're 100% on it.
Right.
We stay at 4 unless we either
Ah.
reduce to 5 or we replace the missing person. And so I think that has to go on the agenda someplace for the board.
If we decide to change it, but we've said, we were talking about
I-
meetings, right?
No, either way, because we need to appoint somebody and the board appoints the person.
sorry.
So it does have to be a
If we-
board agenda item.
If we leave it with, there's three choices, but if we leave it with 6 and simply leave the vacancy.
Oh, that's the third choice, I see. Can we get a staff report that has those three options? Leave it vacant, appoint somebody, or reduce the number to 5, and then we'll just have some quick discussion at the board? Do you guys care, 5 or 6?
So my question was when we're going to be meeting, we were having trouble setting those dates up, right?
5 and 3 easier.
Yes.
I think we should recommend not doing option 3 from this committee.
I'm fine with that.
So we're not able to make a position, this is not agendized item, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, it's not? Okay,
Right.
never mind.
This is a referral to staff to put
Yeah.
something on the agenda.
Yep.
These are the exact questions that I think we need to be in a position to.
Well, I think one thing we should consider is that there's gonna be changes next year, it's better to encourage having more people show up at these meetings. So if you can get 4 people to show up, and I know Andrea does a good job of reminders and everything else, and the doodle thing is really great, so.
As long as somebody
we're
doesn't
gonna-
misinterpret which date it's on, totally my fault, I
Yeah.
apologize.
Lots going on.
So I think it'll help create a, a board member who hopefully knows a little bit more.
But 6 is a lot of people, none of our other committees have 6.
We
We can't really discuss.
We actually can't discuss it because it's not on our agenda, but
Alright.
if you guys will queue up the question and we can have this discussion, and maybe I'll bug your person to make sure they've talked to you ahead of time, because it's gonna be decided
Next
with
week.
the board.
So I do have a follow-up
I mean,
question
I
though.
don't know if you're working on
I'm not that passionate about it, the discussion.
I am, I agree
The
with
follow-up
you,
question
so.
is, did we sort the rest of the meetings?
Did we wait?
Weren't we
For the
supposed to sort?
executive
For
group?
the executive
No,
group?
I
That's
need
something
to-
different.
Okay.
We'll talk about
Just
it after.
Tuesdays at noon are bad for me.
Okay, so that's all we have, and I've
So
got.
we'll agendize this for the September 11 meeting.
Yeah, let's, if we can, let's get it up and get it done.
So our next meeting is October 1st or whatever it is.
No, it's early October.
Okay, so we'll call this meeting adjourned. Sorry guys for a little bit of rush at the end.
No, that's